Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group, located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And happy, merry day after Christmas, my friends. Hopefully you had a very beautiful time celebrating the holiday season. Hopefully you're still going. Today, we had a day after Christmas drop. It's a post-Christmas Day miracle. At 7 a.m., boy, oh boy, did we get a drop from this fella. His name is David Zweig, and he's a journalist, a reporter over at The Atlantic, New York Magazine, Wired, New York Times, and now at the Free Press, which was sort of Barry Weiss's new entity, which is available for you to go follow and so on. So we're going to go through this. This is Twitter Files Thread 10. That dropped, and you can follow David Zweig over there at David Zweig. And after we go through the Twitter files, we had a couple of additional drops from two people that I wanted to share. Seeing this cover up, right, this sort of collusion to censor Americans, it was just all over the media. We're going to check in with the rabbit hole, and we're going to ask ourselves what YouTube is doing, because we know that Twitter is not alone. And so if you want to be a part of the show, my friends, the best place to do that is by going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have an awesome community chatting away over there. And so come and check us out, where we do some additional members only things and so on and so forth. But let's get right into it, because this is the big story of the day. Twitter Files 10 drop. This one talking COVID, the pandemic, and a whole lot of collusion between the U.S. government, the White Houses, two of them, and Twitter, along with a bunch of other big tech platforms. We're going to go through this courtesy of David Zweig, and as we talked about, David Zweig is now being looped into the fold. All of these different Twitter file drops have been coming out from a number of different journalists. We've already talked about Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, Schellenberger, and others. Now we've got David Zweig over at The Atlantic, New York Mag, New York Times, and now the Free Press. You can follow him on Substack and on Twitter at David Zweig, which I encourage you to do, because it is going to continue to come. Twitter Files 10 starts. It says, the Twitter Files, how Twitter rigged the COVID debate by censoring info that was true but inconvenient to U.S. government policy. Now, we all lived through this, but we saw this firsthand, but now we're getting to see the inside baseball. By discrediting doctors and other experts who disagreed, and by suppressing ordinary users, including some who shared the CDC's own data. So 3 ways that Twitter rigged the COVID debate. Censored information that was true, discredited doctors and other experts, and suppressed ordinary users, including some people who only were guilty of sharing the CDC's own data. 3 big problems. And of course, the standard disclaimer applies here on YouTube, right? Follow the CDC, listen to the World Health Organization, talk to your doctor, and follow all the recommendations. This is not about COVID policy per se, right? We're not making any medical claims or encouraging you to do anything at all. This is a conversation about the discussion about the policy. Can we even have conversations about the policy, not what the policy is? And Twitter said that we could not. We all lived through this. Now we're looking inside. It says, somebody saying Rumble's not working. And I don't know why that might be. Let's see if I can fix that real quickly. Doesn't look like I can. I do not know why it's not working. Looks like it's on my... all right. Anyways, we'll continue. So, 3 ways that the government was interfering. David Zweig tells us accordingly. V says it's working now. Great. David continues. Entry number 2. So far, the Twitter files have focused on evidence of Twitter's secret blacklists, how the company functioned as a kind of subsidiary of the FBI, and how the executives at Twitter rewrote the platform's rules to accommodate their own political desires. And we went through all of these. We've covered all 9 preceding this one. We listened to Yoel Roth. We saw the emails from Gouveia, back and forth from Long Con and Con Long, and all of the different red squares and yellow squares and green squares and all of the conversations taking place inside of Slack at Twitter, trying to nuke people. Kayleigh McEnany, James Woods, they were debating Trump's tweets. And there was no real standard. Everything was very amorphous, very fluid and dynamic. David continues, he says, "What we have yet to cover, though, in all of the preceding 9 Twitter files is COVID. This reporting for the Free Press, which is Barry Weiss's new endeavor at the FP, is one piece of that important story. And it is just one piece. Elon said that there's going to be much more coming out on this. He confirmed that today. And he said it will be coming later next week, which of course we will cover. The United States government," says David, "pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about the pandemic." And this is where it crosses the line, where it becomes a private company acting in collusion with the government. If the government is extending itself and sort of putting its arms around this private entity, that private entity becomes a state actor. It becomes an extension of the government, which makes their censorship and their suppression and their elevation all unconstitutional and in violation of the First Amendment. David continues. He says, "Internal files at Twitter that I viewed while on assignment for the FP showed that both the Trump and the Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes." Trump did it too. Government in general wants to censor you and encroach on your liberties, because your free speech and your voice is very inconvenient for them. This is uniform. It doesn't matter amongst the parties. The Republican Party is just as rotten as the Democratic Party. They're the ones who brought forward with good fervor and good aggression the Patriot Act in the first place. Both sides were giddy as schoolgirls with that one. But this continues. Trump did it. Biden did it too. And once you give them that little bit of power, they're just going to keep going and going and going. David says, "At the onset of the pandemic, according to meeting notes, the Trump administration was especially concerned about panic buying." Remember the toilet paper catastrophe? "They came looking for, quote, help from tech companies to combat misinformation about runs on the grocery stores." But there were runs on the grocery stores. We all lived it. Remember going to the grocery store and there was nothing there? Good time to plug 4Patriots survival food. Go to 4patriots.com and use promo code Robert to save 10% off your food storage supplies. Goodness. There were runs on grocery stores. The Trump White House, specifically Michael Kratsios, led the Trump administration's calls for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation. Areas of focus included conspiracies around 5G cell towers, runs on grocery stores, and misinformation that could stoke panic buying and behaviors. There was coverage here, and there was coverage here. Documents here, documents there. All from the White House. And it wasn't just Twitter that they were involved with. The meetings with the Trump White House, says David, were also attended by Google and Facebook and Microsoft and others. Twitter, from the meeting notes, sub A, alongside several other tech companies, including Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, participated. Activities included a standing weekly call to share general trends and hosting a shared Microsoft Teams group. Some of the companies, not Twitter, gathered open-sourced information from researchers, and our teams fed this information to the Twitter policy enforcement teams. All of them colluding with one another. Unfortunately, Elon couldn't buy Google and Microsoft as well, and Facebook, so we could see what they're doing to all of us. When the Biden administration took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter was on COVID. The focus was on the anti-vaxxer accounts, especially on Alex Berenson. Here are the notes. Under the category Biden, bullet point 1, one of the first meeting requests from the Biden White House was about COVID misinformation. Per the regular process, public policy took the meeting. Biden's staff focused on vaccines and high-profile anti-vaxxer accounts, including Alex Berenson, who was very vocal, former New York Times writer, and got nuked off the platform. We were all there for it. In the summer of 2021, President Biden said social media companies were killing people. Jen Psaki was behind the podium for allowing vaccine misinformation. Literally, right? Berenson was suspended hours after Biden's comments and kicked off the platform the following month because the king spoke. He said, Twitter, you should feel bad. You're killing people if you don't do something about this. And Alex Berenson is running rampant. How many people allegedly did he kill, right? If they're saying that Twitter was killing people, how about Alex Berenson? And so that was the narrative. Okay, we were all killing people by objecting in any way, shape, or form. You remember if you had questions, if you said, where did that thing come from? Did it come from China? Or did this come from Fauci? We have questions about this. We have questions about it. Remember, they said, you're killing grandma. How dare you object to lockdown? How dare you not take the jab immediately? Misinformation. In fact, we on this channel got suspended for it multiple times for medical misinformation. Remember the whole Joe Rogan saga when we were defending him for talking to his doctor and taking the regimen that he took? And him publicly saying that, a conversation about him saying that got us suspended for misinformation. Remember when there were all sorts of policies about Biden and how they were going to encourage a bunch of Americans to get on board with their narrative? We got a strike for that one too. YouTube shut us up left and right. Berenson was a very vocal person with a much, much bigger reach than we've ever had. And he got nuked too. It was top to bottom. They were going after everybody. Now, Berenson sued and then settled with Twitter. In the legal process, Twitter was compelled to release certain internal communications, which showed direct White House pressure on Twitter to take action against Berenson. And if you remember, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, and it is involving free speech, free association. The White House taking direct pressure, and all of this pressure manifesting itself through the FBI and through other government entities. Here is something that came out of the Slack channel. You can see this is from April 2021, April 22nd, 2021. Biden's already in office. Slack channel is private. The channel is DM-something-something. Somebody says at 13:14:03. They write, how is the White House? Fingers crossed in skin tone 3 emoji, appropriately matching the user's actual tone, I suppose. How is the White House? Response at 13:15:59, about 2 minutes later. Overall, pretty good! Exclamation point. They had one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hasn't been kicked off the platform, though. Otherwise, their questions were pointed but fair, and mercifully, we had answers. Response back is, that's great, whatever. We can't see it. So, you can see that the White House is specifically targeting Alex Berenson, not even the subject, okay, COVID misinformation. They said, we want that guy, not just people who question the vaxes. We want him. Bring us his head. Why is he still on your platform? They had one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hasn't been kicked off from the platform yet. Okay, Do you see how this is even phrased? One really tough question. Sort of like not really a tough question. It's kind of like a directive. Why is he still on your platform? Why are you disobeying us? We are the White House. You work for us. And they don't think that question was really appropriate. It sounds like otherwise their questions were pointed but fair. So that question was not fair. Mercifully, we had answers. Okay, mercifully, like they are subservient to the White House. This is state action. This is the U.S. government as a state actor. This is them talking to their subordinates. How is the White House? Fingers crossed. Hopefully, you didn't anger the entire U.S. government, did you? Oh, skin tone 3? No. Mercifully, we had answers. The dictators over there aren't going to end us. Total subordination. 11. David writes, a December 2022 summary of meetings with the White House by Lauren Culbertson, Twitter's head of U.S. public policy, adds even more new evidence of the White House's pressure campaign. And it cements that it repeatedly attempted to directly influence the platform. Lauren Culbertson wrote that the Biden team was, quote, very angry that Twitter had not been more aggressive in deplatforming multiple accounts. They wanted Twitter to do more. Here is a snippet from Lauren's notes. She says, the Biden team was not satisfied with Twitter's enforcement approach as they wanted Twitter to do more and to deplatform several accounts. And because of this dissatisfaction, we were asked to join several other calls. They were very angry in nature. Here's a presentation the Twitter team used. Very angry in nature. That we were asked to join several other calls. Do you think that they had the opportunity, the ability to say no to those calls? To say, actually, it's our company. You don't run our company. You're not an investor. You're not a stockholder. In fact, you're the U.S. government. You've got a lot more power. You shouldn't be meddling around our affairs. You should know better. This is the big brother, younger brother situation. You should be recognizing that it's irresponsible to crap all over the First Amendment and not allow us to engage in this. But they're not. They are exploiting them because Twitter has capabilities that they don't. They are prohibited. They are circumscribed. They have to stay within the hula hoop of constitutional liberty ordinarily. They're obviously not doing that now. Twitter gives them an outsourcing off-ramp. They can now use additional tools that otherwise they are prohibited from using. And if Twitter doesn't comply, they're dissatisfied. Several phone calls, and they're angry. They have no authority to be angry. They have no basis for being angry. It's not their company. They're the government. They should know better. They're violating literally the law. David continues. He says, Twitter executives did not fully capitulate to the Biden team. An extensive review of internal communications at the company revealed employees often debating moderation cases in great detail and with more care than was shown by the government towards free speech. The government doesn't care. There's no accountability. There are a bunch of lifers in there. They have basically total power, no accountability at all. Anytime they get even remotely and close in trouble, the DC jury just says, no, they're our team, so what do we care? And everybody gets off scot-free. But in this case, there were, in fact, some Twitter users who said, hold on a minute. We know what the First Amendment says. And shout out to all of those Twitter executives who did put up a fight. And even more of a shout out to the ones who put up a real fight, not the token fight, who said, should we think about the First Amendment? Yes, but COVID. Yes, but Trump. Yes, but insurrectionists. Yes, but the mandates, right? And so on. Ultimately, after their debates, Twitter did suppress the views. Many from doctors and scientific experts. Many that conflicted with the official positions of the White House. Illegal. As a result, legitimate findings and questions that would have expanded the public debate went missing. They weren't involved. So while Twitter is mulling this over, while they're going through this process, while they're debating what's appropriate for you to hear, because you don't know. We're all so stupid here, myself included. I mean, they were censoring all of us. So, in the entire country, really the entire world, we couldn't understand the depth, the nuance of the debate about the pandemic. And so all of these unelected people in collusion with a bunch of other unelected people from the CIA, FBI, DHS, Biden White House, Trump White House, the entire infrastructure, all coming together to protect us from ourselves and each other, because we're all a bunch of rabid wild animals who can't think clearly. So as they're debating this, David says, yeah, there are 3 problems with this little party they were having amongst themselves. 1, much of the content moderation was conducted by bots, trained on machine learning and AI. Impressive in their engineering, yet still too crude for such nuanced work. Tried to automate this stuff. Second, they outsourced it to contractors in places like the Philippines. Also moderated content. They were given decision trees to aid in the process, but tasking non-experts to adjudicate tweets on very complex topics like medical issues and mask efficacy was destined for a significant error rate. You can see here are some of the threads, decision trees. This pops up on the screen. Some tech employee is working on this. They say, is this claim about any of the following topics? Is this illegal tweet about, drop down 1, the COVID-19 misleading information policy? Oh, it's been discontinued, effective November 23rd. So that drop down is invalid, but presumably there was another drop down. We also have what kind of message is being advanced regarding this topic. So like you'd say, this is a COVID violation. What kind of message is this? It's about the vaccine. Okay. Specifically, what is being said? Select. Oh, it's misinformation about its efficacy. Okay. And what is the author's position? He's a racist bigot. Okay. Right. Click next. Oh, that tweet's illegal. Execute the account. Right. So enforcement recommendation, death penalty. That's not on there, but presumably it is somewhere. If they could do that via Twitter, I'm sure they would. Third, says David, and most importantly, the buck stopped with higher level employees at Twitter who chose the inputs for the bots and the decision trees. And they subjectively decided and escalated cases and suspensions. As it is with all people and institutions, there was individual and collective bias. So people like Yoel Roth, Vijay Agadi, and others who are on the trust and safety panels, James Baker, who used to work at the FBI, all of them, they had their own personal biases, but they also worked at Twitter, which has been founded and sort of born and bred and raised out of Silicon Valley, right? With all of those morals and principles and values or whatever they've got, in those institutions there. So it's got a collective bias, okay, whether you agree with it or not, right? All institutions do. You have founders who set values and things move. So 3 problems. 1, Twitter used bots. Bots aren't that great. 2, they outsource their stuff on very complex, nuanced issues to people who probably weren't that qualified to do it. And then 3, all of those decisions, all of the outsourcing, all of the bots, they were programmed by the same subjective people who just made the decisions based on a whim. All of it worked up to them, the same heads. So there was no objectivity. All of the decision trees and all of the suspensions ultimately resulted from the decisions of a select few people. Now with COVID, this bias bent heavily towards establishment dogmas. Yeah, we lived through it. Inevitably, dissident yet legitimate content was labeled as misinformation, and the accounts of doctors and others were suspended both for tweeting opinions and demonstrably true information. Exhibit A. Take a look at this fella, Dr. Martin Kulldorff. He's an epidemiologist at Harvard, the medical school. Will be nice to Harvard here today. He tweeted views at odds with the U.S. public health authorities and the American left. which, of course, is the political affiliation of nearly the entire staff at Twitter. There's a conversation taking place back in March. Somebody named at Electra Ascendon, March 15th, was replying to Dr. Martin, who went to Harvard. He says, "Hey, doctor, do you think that younger age people should make a decision about this thing?" He says, "I'm not anti, but I'm a little, I got questions about this." It seems sort of like there's a religious mantra around this thing, like they're kind of like psychotic people. And he says, no, basically he's saying, I have a take, right? I have a take on this process, and, talk, make your own decisions about some of this stuff. Talk to people. And he has a take on it. He's a doctor from Harvard, right? And he made his opinion known, public, which was a valid opinion from a legitimate doctor. Internal emails had a big problem with that. They say that they show an intent to action by a moderator saying that Kuldorf's tweet violated the company's misinformation policy, saying that that tweet was misinformation. It was false. Here's the email. March 26, 5:09 p.m. It says, "Hi, team. Heads up. Intent to action. We're going to nuke this guy for illegal tweets. Hi, team. Sending a heads up that we will take action on Martin, doctor. He's a professor at Harvard Medical School, in parentheses, for violating our COVID-19 misinformation policy, specifically by sharing false information regarding the efficacy of the jabs, which goes against the CDC guidelines regarding the efficacy." Right? So he has a disagreement. So whoever this person is who's sending this email, and again, I'm encouraging you to follow the CDC guidelines. I don't know necessarily that whoever this anonymous tweet or employee is, that he knows more than Martin Kuldorf, a Harvard doctor, but evidently he does, right? He's closer in alignment. He thinks that he has the final say. And so he decided that it was in violation of, I guess, the CDC guidelines. So he's smarter than a professor of Harvard Medical School who's sharing his opinion on Twitter. Now, this stuff is so problematic because, it really wrecked the ability to discuss these issues and provide solutions. This type of censorship politicized the entire conversation, and it was really rotten what they did. And I think it caused a significant amount more harm than it needed to. We could have had a legit conversation about all this, and none of this was necessary, and the world would have been in a better place, because that's the value of free speech. It actually provides utility. It's not just because it feels good to say something. There's utility in the conversation. It produces results and outcomes. But their position on this is that those results and outcomes, that sort of ironing of the axe or the sharpening of the sword, is not necessary, because we just shut you up, and then we'll get better results by shutting you up. They don't understand how really history works and why free speech is so important. But fortunately, we're getting to see their little dictator ways here in front of us. So they want to censor somebody who's contributing to the conversation, providing the sharpening of the sword. And Kuldorf, of course, is an expert. No matter what you say about Harvard, apparently he's an expert. One of which also happened to be in line with policies in numerous other countries. Okay? Yet it was deemed false information by Twitter moderators merely because it differed from the CDC guidelines. And after Twitter took action, after that little censor said intent to take action, Kuldorf's tweet was slapped with a misleading label, and all replies and likes were shut off, throttling the tweet's ability to be seen and shared by many people, the ostensible core function of the platform. And I agree with this so heavily, right? I think that Twitter, this is nation state level fraud. I've said this many times. I know I sound like a broken record on this. FTX defrauded crypto. Their product was crypto. Elizabeth Holmes, her product was blood testing. She defrauded her investors. Bernie Madoff, he had investment vehicles. He defrauded his investors. Twitter had the promise of free speech, that we could communicate and exchange ideas. It was a social network that connected us socially. We got on there because we wanted to hear from people who had differing opinions. They got on there because people wanted to hear from them. The whole thing was fraudulent. The whole thing was manipulated. And the truth, which is one of their main features, which is the product of free speech, was cut off. They defrauded the entire world. Koldorf's tweet was slapped with this label, misleading. Ugh. Learn why health officials recommend whatever for most, okay? This tweet can't be replied to or liked. It says Dr. Koldorf, right? And so it's just totally gone, totally nuked. There is nothing else to do with it because that is disfavored speech. It's illegal. It goes against the narrative. David says, in my review of the internal files, I found countless instances of tweets labeled as misleading or taken down entirely, sometimes triggering account suspension simply because they veered from CDC guidance or differed from establishment views. Illegal. They don't get any benefit of hashing out the debate. They just make a decision. They call it science, which has never been what science is, consensus science, whatever that was. And the rest of us had to shut our mouths. A tweet by somebody named Kelly KGA, who is an internet rando and public health fact checker, she says, focused on COVID kids, restoring normalcy, and COVID metrics in Georgia. Just dropped her a follow. You may want to do the same thing. She was flagged as misleading. Replies and likes were disabled on her tweet, even though her tweet was using the CDC's own data. She wasn't making anything up. She was just pulling information from them. Here's what this tweet looks like. Her response was, "This is an excellent example of cherry picking. If you narrow this down and you ignore all of the other things, then you get a certain result." And she's literally looks like taking a screenshot from the CDC website. The picture is all pixelated, so we can't see the details on it. But they slapped on the tag there. Misleading. Learn why health officials have a different opinion. August 11th, 10:43 a.m. Can't be shared, replied, or liked. They put a muzzle on her mouth for sharing the CDC's own data. She was not alone. Internal records showed that a bot had flagged that tweet and that it received many tattles, quote, what the system amusingly called reports from users, tattles, which is exactly right. That's what they are, right? Every time a user sends a report in, it is a tattle. It's a hall monitor. It's like, Miss Johnson, he was 2 minutes late. You know, did you see him come in the back there? And she's like, will you just shut up? Gosh, you're annoying. Who cares? You know, those kids. Yeah. Well, that triggered a manual review by a human who, despite the tweet showing actual CDC data, nevertheless labeled it misleading because it was true, showing CDC data, and made a good point. Tellingly, the tweet by Kelly KGA was labeled misleading. It was a reply to a tweet that contained actual misinformation. And so COVID has never been the leading cause of death in children, is what they say. Yet that tweet is still on the platform without a misleading label. So here's another image. This came in August 11th. Somebody said, here's some data. And they made a claim about what COVID does. And then Kelly responds, you're kind of an idiot, actually. That's not true at all. Here's the CDC guidelines. But this didn't support the narrative. Kelly's response was like, you're making too big of a deal of this. Censored Gregory Travis at Greg Travis. He was making a big deal about it. Okay, if it's kind of like on the hyperventilation scale, right? If you're hyperventilating about COVID and your solution is to put everybody in bubble wrap, it really doesn't matter what you say. You can say anything. It can be misinformation. It doesn't even have to be real. It can be totally fictional. But as long as you're a level 10 hyperventilator and you are cool with like putting your kids in balloons, then you can say it, whatever you want. But if you're on the other side and you say, well, hang on a minute, maybe we should talk about this, you are literally a bigot insurrectionist who wants to kill grandma. So that's how the policy was implemented. Actual misinformation's allowed. Truth is not, according to Mr. David. In item 28, David continues. He says, whether by humans or algorithms, content that was contrarian but true was still subject to getting flagged or suppressed because it's not ever about truth. Okay, it's about narrative. This tweet was labeled misleading, even though the owner of this account, Uzi Boozy, is a physician. He was referring to the results of a published study. He published this. He says below, this is the first study I have showing that certain things are related. And he links a graphic here to a study. They put a big fat misleading label down there at the bottom. We don't consider this to be the truth. You are a murderer. Andrew Boston, a Rhode Island physician, was also permanently suspended from Twitter after receiving multiple strikes for misinformation. One of his strikes was for a tweet referring to the results from a peer-reviewed study on mRNA vaccines. Here's what a doctor published on Twitter. He said in a link, this link came over from onlinelibrary.wiley.com, andrology, something, BN216, 2B2 temporarily impairs semen concentration, and total motile count. And this is what he says. He's referencing a study. He's saying, does boostering yield another decline and followed by another decline? And, there are consequences. He's saying, are there more declines? Who knows? Asking a question. Guess what? That's illegal. Multiple strikes. Twitter said, how dare you? A review of Twitter log files revealed that an internal audit conducted after Boston's attorney contacted Twitter found that only one of Boston's 5 violations were actually valid. Oh, you're kidding me. So they were just giving him additional violations so that they could accelerate his permanent suspension. They didn't tell him about anything like that? No, of course not. So the lawyer sends a letter over there. They say, hey, censorious jerks, why did you nuke my client? There's no record that he committed any violations. We know you've got a 5-strike policy. He's got no strikes. So why did you can him? Lawyer gets a response back from Twitter. They say, hi, lawyer. We have re-reviewed each of the strikes and we've collaborated with Site Integrity to validate our findings. Of the 5 violations, 4 of them are not invalid and are not in violation. Sorry about that. And only this tweet is in violation of misinformation. As a result, we have now unsuspended the user and responded to their appeal to let them know that we've rescinded their suspension. After this guy hired a lawyer and was banned for how long? Also, we've left a pin note on the account to ensure that before any enforcement action will be taken, it's going to be subject to our review. We'll also remove the annotations on the tweets that we have marked as no bio. Wow, beautiful. So Twitter customer service is really great. Once you get a lawyer involved and you send that over to them, they will then respond. But, no apologies. They're not going to let anybody else know that they're doing this stuff. They just sort of kind of let the guy squeak right on back onto the actual platform. And nobody says anything about it. The one Boston tweet found to still be in violation cited data that was legitimate but inconvenient to the public health establishment and their narrative about the risk of the flu versus the vid. We have the old, scales of justice. Which one's worse? We have this big debate. Dr. Boston posted something like this. He said, well, actually, here's my opinion on the debate. This is what I think the difference is. These are the pros. These are the cons. This is how we would weigh the risk factors for adults, children. These are the things that people talk about. When you have a very diverse population with different risk variables, people have a lot of different health concerns. Other people are healthy. Some people are not. So we debate these things. And as the debate rages on, our swords become sharper. We become more intelligent. The knowledge becomes synthesized. But you can't do that if half the debate is shut up. David says that this tweet was not only flagged by a bot, but its violation was also manually affirmed by a staff member, is telling that both the algorithms and human biases are at play. Bostom's account was suspended for months and was finally restored on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas, Boston. You had your account nuked for months and you couldn't participate in the conversation at all for sharing what seems like very useful, valid information. Another example of human bias run amok was the reaction to this tweet by Donald Trump. Many Trump tweets led to extensive internal debates, and this one was no different. Trump posted this October 5th, 2020, short month before the election took place. Trump says, after catching the COVID, says, I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed, under the Trump administration, some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. Man, I miss his tweets, man. Drugs are so good, Trump's doing somersaults and cartwheels on the balcony of the White House. Don't let it dominate your life, which is exactly right. Exactly the right phrase. We did. We let it dominate us, and here we are. That tweet caused a big ruckus over there at Twitter. In a surreal exchange, says David, Jim Baker, at the time Twitter's deputy general counsel. Jim Baker, of course, we're very familiar with here on this channel. We studied his work when he was colluding with Michael Sussman to try to derail the 2016 election when Sussman was working for Hillary, by extension. And they were trying to insert the Trump-Russia collusion story in the months preceding the election. Our friend Jake Sullivan from Oxford published that very interesting statement as the leading campaign advisor for Hillary Clinton in October. That was their October surprise. Didn't work out well for them. Jim Baker got in big trouble for some of that. Not really in big trouble. He kind of got, a little slap on the wrist. They said, FBI is not a good place for you. Where else can you go, Jim? Where else can you go? How about our other intelligence agency, Twitter? Perfect. I love Twitter. I love censoring people. I hate Trump. I hate Republicans. I hate America. I'll love it there. In a surreal exchange, Jim Baker, he was the lawyer for Twitter. He asks why telling people to not be afraid of the vid wasn't a violation of COVID's policy on Twitter. He says, on October 5th, 2020, 12:10 p.m., this is just a short month before the election. Jim Baker sends an email to Yoel Roth and to Stacia. He says, hey, Yoel and Stacia, can you guys tell me, why isn't this POTUS tweet, hyperlinked to Trump, a violation of our COVID policy? In parentheses, he says, especially this don't be afraid of COVID statement, ? Thanks, period, Jim. Why isn't this especially don't be afraid of COVID? I mean, that's illegal. Everybody has to be afraid of COVID. Jim says, I'm afraid of COVID. Yoel, I know you're petrified of COVID. Stacia, it seems like you sort of make believing like you care about all this, but you don't. But anyways, can we ban him for that? Because other people might have hope and optimism that COVID should not dominate their lives and that they're going to be okay. Isn't that like what a leader does? Don't let it dominate your life. We're going to get through this current crisis. Stop listening to the hysterics over this. Can we ban him for that? Says Jim. Yoel, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, had to explain, hey, dumb Jimbo, optimism isn't misinformation, idiot. Go back to the FBI. We have intelligence here. So he says this to Jim. He says, hey, Jim, weirdo. Adding you to the main thread on this subject, in short, this tweet is a broad, optimistic statement, if you can read English. It doesn't incite people to do something harmful, nor does it recommend against taking precautions or following mask directives or other guidelines. It doesn't fall within the published scope of our policies. Curious whether you have a different read on it, though, says Yoel. So shout out to Yoel for telling Jim, he's a dummy. No, even Yoel's like, Jim, no, bro, are you serious? He's like, let me know if you find a different way to thread this needle. Like, if you have a different take, let me know, because then I'll try to nuke this thing as quick as can be. But otherwise, it's just a generic statement. Trump could get up and say, good morning, I had eggs for breakfast. And they'd say, well, what kind of eggs? Were they organic? Oh, well, you hate organic chickens, and organic chickens are necessary to be healthy, and you have to be healthy to survive COVID. Therefore, Trump wants you dead. Ban his account. He had eggs for breakfast. They just follow the bouncing ball because they're weird. So Jim gets that email back. He's probably not very happy about that. Okay, he used to work at the FBI. He's in charge. He's, Yoel Roth didn't work at the FBI. Jim did. Remember Kelly KGA with that CDC data tweet? Twitter's response to her is clarifying. Here's what they wrote. They say, hello, Kelly. Thanks for getting back to us about the label on your tweet. This comes from Twitter support. Kelly was the individual who posted the CDC data. Hi, Kelly. Thanks for getting back to us about the label on your tweet, says Twitter. Our teams are using and improving on internal systems to proactively monitor content related to COVID. These systems help ensure that we're not amplifying tweets with these warnings or labels and detecting the high visibility content quickly. Additionally, we'll continue to rely on trusted partners. Who's that? FBI, CIA, OGA, DHS, Biden, Trump, all of them, to identify content that is likely to result in offline harm. Given the dynamic situation, we will prioritize reviewing and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. Oh my gosh. Prioritize anything that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. That's like, do you want to come over for a party? Increased exposure, increased transmission. We'll learn a lot as we use these new labels, and we're open to adjusting as we explore labeling different types of misleading information. This process is ongoing, and we'll work to make sure that these and other labels and warnings show up across Twitter. Embedded tweets or tweets viewed by people not logged into Twitter may still appear without a label. They write, serving the public conversation remains our overarching mission. Not really. They're censoring an entire topics. Okay, entire portions of the conversation are literally being censored. So that is a lie. They want one narrative to be delivered. They want a conversation about one part. Kamala loves Venn diagrams. It's like one of 3 circles is allowed if it's approved. We'll keep working to build tools and offer context so that people can find credible and authentic information on Twitter, the information that we decide is credible and authentic. Now, we appreciate you letting us know, and we'll share this with the team as we look ahead to potential updates and changes, says Twitter. So David writes that Twitter made a decision via the political leanings of senior staff and government pressure that the public health authorities' approach to the pandemic that prioritized mitigation over other concerns was, quote, there it is, the science. And if you disagreed with the science, or Fauci, who himself was science personified, then you are a murderer. In 38, David says, information that challenged that view, such as showing harms of the vax or that could be perceived as downplaying the risks, especially to kids, was subject to moderation, even suppression, no matter whether those views were correct or adopted abroad. They didn't like the story, whether it's true or not. They didn't like your opinion, whether it complied or comported with reality. They just wanted the story. What might this pandemic, asks David, what might this pandemic and its aftermath have looked like if there had been more open debate on Twitter and other social media platforms, not to mention the mainstream press, about the origins of the vid? about the lockdowns and about the risks to kids and much more. What could we have learned? What could we have avoided? What could we have prevented? How many lives could we have saved had we actually just had a legitimate conversation? We all would have been smarter. We all would have had more information. Ideas would have been tested. Actual science could have been conducted where you come up with a hypothesis, you test it, you make adjustments, you come to a conclusion, and you test it again. We didn't get to test anything. They decided for us. And they shut us up in violation of our constitutional rights. Everywhere, not just on Twitter, all over the entire country and the world. David says, thanks to Schellenberger, Woodhouse, L. Fang, and the team at the FP for their help in reporting this story. And so I'd encourage you to get more of this, to go over and follow David Zwig, and to read the full story with more details, go over to thefp.com, how Twitter rigged the COVID debate. Of course, all of that is available on Twitter and over at the FP. And I did retweet this. If you are following me already at Robert Gouveia ESQ, then you can certainly get a copy of that as well. We've got 10 viewers watching on Twitter right now as we speak. Absolutely incredible. We'll take some of those questions here in a minute. But we have a couple other stories to share because there's more on this or in this vein. In response to Twitter Files 10, we had a very interesting tweet from this individual, The Rabbit Hole, posted this. He said, it's hard to understate the levels of dishonesty that we all witnessed during COVID. Said no amount of political doublespeak can make this poof away. The game has changed. Once the internet has receipts, the evidence is forever. And here's what he took pictures of. 2 screen grabs from media headlines from all over the place. New York Times, The Verge, Business Insiders, AP, The Wall Street Journal, NBC News. Look at these side-by-sides. The New York Times told us about the George Floyd protests. It said here, did the Floyd protests lead to a virus surge? Here's what we know. Answer, no, it didn't. Everything was perfect. In fact, people got healthier. But if you contrast that with another story, did mixing a riot with a pandemic yield a super spreader event? Oh, no. So J6, it's a nuclear bomb of COVID. Floyd protests, the summer of love, fiery but mostly peaceful, not a problem at all. Billions of dollars of damage, not a problem though. Over at The Verge, they wrote, blaming protesters, the Floyd protesters, for the COVID-19 spread ignores the bigger threats to health. So those Summer of Love protests, not a big deal. Bigger threats to health are police officers, evidently. But then The Verge says COVID-19 cases in the Capitol are only the tip of the iceberg. Catastrophe there on J6. Business Insider says, don't blame Black Lives Matter for spikes in COVID cases. But then they say the Capitol insurrection seems to have caused a super spreader event amongst lawmakers. Little bit of a different tone. AP says little evidence that peaceful, fiery protests spread coronavirus, but possible virus exposure to lawmakers occurred when they were sheltering during the riot. You see, it's literal, pure propaganda. NBC News says BLM protests have not led to COVID-19 spikes, but National Guard members and U.S. Capitol Police officers test positive for the vid. Wall Street Journal said early data show no uptick in COVID from protests, but at least 3 lawmakers test positive for COVID after the Capitol attack. Oh, weird. Literal propaganda, right? Same here, Vox. They put, the effect of Black Lives Matter on COVID cases is explained. Not really involving anything. The attack on the Capitol, though, may have been a super spreader event. Womp womp. Washington Post, protests probably didn't lead to COVID spikes, but it's hard to know for sure. But they know for sure in the Capitol, storming of the Capitol was textbook potential coronavirus super spreader event, according to experts. Forbes said new research determines the protest did not cause a spike, but lawmakers sheltering down were exposed. Minnesota saw no rise in cases in protests there, but Capitol Hill riot was a super spreader event. CNN says BLM did not lead to a rise. 38 Capitol police officers tested positive. Coronavirus surges are not linked to BLM until they are. House GOP leaders suggest without evidence that protests are driving up COVID cases, but COVID cases are killing are killing nearly 3,000 in the U.S. every day after the surge event from the Capitol riots. Okay, everywhere you look, all the copy and paste media idiots, they got their talking points. They wake up. I don't know where they get their messages. It's got to be a Slack channel. Maybe it's like a Telegram group or maybe a Signal app or something like that. I don't know what they're doing, but they all get the updates. They all just copy and paste. They make a little bit of a couple of adjustments and they publish their stories. And because there's a gatekeeping function that exists on Twitter, these are the only stories that can really get through there. So if they want to write a story about the surge after the J6 event, if they want that story to be promoted on the socials, they got to write them a certain way. They can't challenge anything, right? It's got to be the same thing essentially. Like a bunch of NPCs just operating, copying, pasting one story to another while they're shutting up anybody who can even challenge them all across the internet. And it's not just on Twitter, my friends. It's also on all of the other platforms. In Twitter Files 9, we talked about Twitter colluding with the CIA or the OGA. Do you think it stops there at Twitter? I don't. And neither does George. Beheezy tweets, says the Lord is good. And you can follow him on Twitter at Beheezy tweets. Here's what he wrote. If you think government infiltration of Twitter is bad, wait until you find out who YouTube's current trust and safety team is. They're also full of ex-government, US-based intel goons. Here's a couple of links over from LinkedIn. Jeffrey Click, he/him, looks like YouTube trust and safety at Google. Wow. Background, U.S. Department of State, U.S. diplomat, 9 years. International Affairs and Intelligence Analyst, Bureau of Intelligence and Research. Oh, we also have this person, Siobhan Oatjudge. Now works as the Global Content Policy Lead for YouTube, but previously 11 years at the U.S. State Department. Oh, and prior to that, he was an Assistant Press Secretary for the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. Perfect. Glad that Siobhan is over there at YouTube. Also, shout out to Jeff Spencer there. He's a policy enforcement manager. Maybe he was one of the guys who gave us a strike or nuked our account. Says that U.S. Department of State, he was there for 1 year. He was a U.S. diplomat before that as a political officer of human rights. Also, Dumitru worked at the Council of Europe. He's been full-time at YouTube now for about 6 months, San Francisco Bay Area. Went to Berkeley School of Law. Great. Human rights consultant from the Council of Europe, and he's an attorney who focuses on hate speech. Great. We've got that one. We have another one. Jai Redder. Used to work at the U.S. DoD, was there for 2 years, was a presidential management fellow analyst at the Office of Chief Information Officer. Also an analyst at the U.S. Department of Treasury before she became the policy lead for violent extremism. Oh, great. This is great. Violent extremism policy lead. They're going to be drafting policies. And she came over from the Department of Defense. You know what that means? Domestic violent homegrown extremism coming down the pike. We also had another one here. Seems like having a prior history working for the U.S. government is a big requirement to work there at YouTube. Wade is the policy lead at YouTube. Used to work at Twitter before that. Prior to that, he was an intern for the National Security Council and also the Defense Intelligence Agency. Tamisha, policy lead. Prior to that, worked at the U.S. Department of State. We have Megan. She also used to work at the State Department for 7 years before YouTube hired her. Global Content Policy Lead. Another person, Matthew, also from the U.S. State Department, was there for 8 years. Deputy Director, Bureau of International Org, Special Assistant, International Organization, Senior Advisor to the UN. UN people as well. George says there's nothing wrong about a government employee choosing to work over there. But if you get censored from YouTube, be rest assured that it's your government doing it to you. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So shout out to George for finding that very important detail, that information. Go be sure to follow George at Heezy Tweets and give that thread a like and a retweet as well. Because, of course, none of this stops with Twitter. All of this extends to all of the big tech platforms because the FBI extends all across America. So does the DHS. They think that they have no constitutional limitations at all. They think they can do whatever it is they want, and they're essentially doing that. So that, my friends, is it for us on the day. I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We are going to wrap it up right there. Let's hear from you. I saw a couple super chats come in. And so let's get those queued up. And thank you, my friends. I think I saw, did I see one come in? There's one. There's at least one. I thought I saw one or two come in. Thank you, everybody, for those. So let's pull those up and say hello to our friends before we jump on over to the after party. We've also got some Twitter comments. So if you're on Twitter, we'll take those comments as well. If you're watching there, drop a comment on Twitter. And then we'll jump over to locals. But all right, we had a couple come in today. Thank you, my friends. SMS McGee's here. Says, when the government doesn't use the Constitution to implement and enforce the laws, when do we lose all morals and justice? Seems like a massive slippery slope. Yeah, you're right about that. It is, right? It's a huge problem. I mean, this is why you hear people like me screaming about the Constitution all the time, because it's a standard, it's a baseline. We need a set of rules to operate under. If there is no set of rules, then everybody just exploits the rules for themselves. And then the country falls apart, which is sort of what it feels like is happening right now. There is really no rhyme or reason. Everybody can just take the law and manipulate it however they want. There's no shared values. There's no shared baseline to operate from. If corporations like Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook are donating to the DNC and in return getting fired FBI agents, can that be a conflict of interest? Yes. Well, I mean, I think it is naturally, right? Because what you're allowed, like, I don't think there's any prohibition against an FBI agent working at Twitter, but I think, yeah, necessarily, like, they should be adversarial to some degree. Okay, the government wants to trample on your rights. That's why we have the Bill of Rights, which says the government can't do these things. So there's supposed to be like checks and balances. When you have a system where both people get advantages by working with each other against our rights, that's where you have this recipe for disaster. It's that they're going to take full advantage of us. They did. We just read all of it in the Twitter files, and it's disgusting behavior. Thank you very much for that one, S. Mick G. I appreciate that. And then, of course, we're going to take over some questions on our Twitter. So if you're on Twitter as well and you're dropping some comments in here, feel free to drop those comments. Let's get to them. And let me just say real quickly, my friends, that I'd invite you to go over to 4patriots.com. I'm not going to play the commercial today, but head on over there. 4patriots.com. We talked about survival food earlier when the stores were gone. I forgot to mention them earlier, but check them out, right? 4patriots.com. Go over there, get some survival food, delicious food, 10% off everything in the store if you use code Robert. And I appreciate that. But let's jump over to Twitter now and take a look at some of these comments. Here from Vientikis. And Vientikis, I think, has a link to some of his shirts. I think V dropped his comment or his shirts in the chat. So support Vientikis and grab one of V's shirts. He says, "Don't you believe in science?" Sort of like a psyop, science. I like it. Yeah, it was just a big sort of mess. Becky says, thank you for the live watching on YouTube right now. So shout out to Becky. We got Ultra John Marino in the house. The real John Marino. Shout out to John Marino. John Marino, John, I didn't even know you were on Twitter, John. Shout out to John Marino. John Marino is an awesome dude, right? He's over at Q Simple, right? John over at Q Simple. That's right. What's up, John? Good to see you, brother. John and I, we had a holiday dinner. We were at an academy together. It's good to see you, John. All right, so and be sure to follow Ultra John Marino as well. All right, we also had another comment from Becky This came in from Brandon Straka. Says, the FBI raiding Trump is only the beginning. I've been trying as hard as I can to get the right to listen. God help us all. Yeah, there's another video here from Chris Nelson. It says, pray for the J6 prisoners who are sitting in American gulags. And another link here, imposing certain sanctions. Yeah, so I've seen, yeah. Interesting. So more links here. Interesting stuff. All right, so those all came in over on Twitter. So I'm going to listen to some of those after the program, because I'm not sure exactly what those are. But thank you for sharing those, my friends. And I think that is about it for us on the day. We early show today because the Twitter files dropped bright and early. And boy, oh boy, we couldn't wait any longer to get to them. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going to jump on over to Locals for our Locals after party. And so if you want to come check us out, please feel free to do that over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. A little bit of a shorter show, so we're going to hang out over there for just a little bit, go through some comments and some additional questions. So come check us out, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Otherwise, my friends, thank you to the sponsors of the show. Don't forget to check out forpatriots.com. They are a great organization. They're a great friend and sponsor of the show. Use promo code Robert, get 10% off anything in the store. And, it's good to be prepared, man. It's good to be prepared with extra calories and extra survival gear, because who knows what's in store. Also, our law firm, the R&R Law Group. Things are slow this week in the courts because of the holiday season. Everything kind of comes to a screeching halt, but the cops are still out there. They're still in Arizona trying to nab all the snowbirds. So if you're traveling around, if you're driving out there and you get stopped from the cops and you get charged with something, our office can help. We have a mission to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. We love to help get good people back on track, make sure the government doesn't trample all over their rights, make sure that the burden of proof remains with them, and that we hold them to the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. 480-787-0394, online, rrlawaz.com. And thank you for your referrals. They do keep us busy. And shout outs to the mods who are modding down the fort. I see Vienti Kisses over there with V. Your link game today has just been beautiful, my friend. Thank you for dropping all of those links. Amazing. And shout outs to our friends K-Bean, to Just Cause. I see Just Cause is in the house with very good advice. Says, drink responsibly this holiday season. It's okay to celebrate and have a ton of fun, but do it responsibly indeed. And shout out to our friend Lean in the house, playing hooky, Ronnie, Cole, Zulu, and Geomancy, who swing by from time to time. That, my friends, is it for us on the show. John McGarvey said, taste test for Patriots. He's over on the Locals. And I think I closed the Rumble when I was trying to diagnose it. So let's say hello to our Rumble friends. Yes. Diet M is here. He's confirming for us. He says Matt Walsh at YouTube, formerly the UN, is a he, him. Yeah, Matt Walsh is at the Daily Wire, but I think that's different than the Matt Walsh who works at YouTube. But thank you to Diet M. Matt Walsh, he's a he, him. Yeah, I think he's pretty clear on his pronouns, I think, over there. He did a whole documentary on it. What is a woman? He knows what a woman is. He did a whole long form film about it. So thank you to Diet M over on our Rumble friends chat. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going to leave it right there. We're jumping over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Everybody, I hope you're having a beautiful day after Christmas, settling down from the holidays, putting all the packages away, all the wrapping papers bundled up. Your garage probably has, boxes and all sorts of stuff all over the place. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself. I want to thank you for joining us here today as we went through Twitter Files 10. There will be many more Twitter files to go through, and I hope you like this video. I hope you subscribe and join us as we continue to cover it. We'll be back here tomorrow. I don't know what time, hopefully the same time as usual, but we'll see what the news has in store for us. But otherwise, have a tremendous evening, my friends. I hope to see you right back here tomorrow so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous afternoon, a beautiful evening, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Locals, don't go anywhere. See you in 30 seconds. Bye-bye, my friends.